The rain didn't fall that morning, it hovered. A thick, unmoving curtain of grey hung over the city, as if even the sky refused to let go. Streets that were once alive with noise and flashing cameras now stood unusually still, like time itself had paused out of respect. People had started gathering long before dawn. Some came quietly, heads lowered, clutching old posters, worn-out magazines, or phones filled with memories they weren't ready to delete. Others arrived in silence, unable to speak, as if saying his name out loud would make everything painfully real. Yu Menglong. A name that once echoed through screens, stages, and hearts, now reduced to whispers carried by trembling lips. No official announcement had prepared them for this moment. Because no one ever believes a legend can truly leave. The black vehicle appeared slowly at the far end of the road, gliding forward like a shadow. No sirens. No dramatic escort. Just a quiet movement that made the crowd instinctively step back, creating a path wide enough for goodbye. And then it hit them. This was real. A single cry broke through the silence. Then another. Then the entire street erupted into a chorus of grief that words could never fully capture. Yu Menglong. Please, come back. I'm still here. I'm still your fan. The voices cracked, overlapped, dissolved into sobs. Some fell to their knees. Others covered their mouths, trying to hold in the pain but failing as tears streamed freely. The car didn't stop. It moved forward steadily, carrying with it a weight heavier than anything physical. The final presence of someone who had once felt immortal. Inside, everything was still. Too still. The man who once laughed under bright lights, who once delivered lines that made millions feel something deep in their chest, now lay peacefully, untouched by the chaos outside. His face, calm. Almost as if he were simply resting after a long day. But everyone knew. This wasn't rest. This was the kind of silence that doesn't end. As the vehicle passed, fans reached out instinctively, fingers stretching into empty space, as though they could somehow hold on to him just a little longer. A girl in the front row collapsed into her friend's arms, shaking uncontrollably. I didn't even get to see him once, she cried. Not even once. An older man, his hands rough and weathered, stood still with tears quietly rolling down his cheeks. He didn't scream. He didn't move. He just watched, his eyes following the car until it began to disappear. He saved me, he whispered to no one in particular. He didn't even know it, but he did. The rain finally began to fall. Soft at first. Then heavier. As if the sky had finally given in. The procession reached the memorial hall, a place that had been transformed overnight into something almost sacred. White flowers covered every surface, their fragrance thick in the air, blending with the faint scent of incense. Portraits of Yu Menglong lined the walls. Different expressions. Different eras. Different versions of the same soul. The playful smile from his early days. The intense gaze from his breakthrough role. The quiet, reflective look from his later interviews. Moments where it almost felt like he was trying to say something deeper, something unspoken. Fans filed in slowly. No pushing. No noise. Just a steady stream of broken hearts. Each person carried their own version of him. A memory. A feeling. A moment that had once meant everything. A young boy stepped forward, holding a crumpled piece of paper. His hands shook as he placed it among the flowers. I drew this for you, he whispered. It was a simple sketch. Not perfect. But filled with something pure. Something real. Nearby, a woman in her late 20s stared at one of the portraits, her eyes red and swollen. You told me to keep going, she said softly. You don't get to leave before I make you proud. Her voice broke, and she turned away, unable to finish. Behind the scenes, away from the cameras and the crowd, the atmosphere was even heavier. People who had known him personally stood together, but no one seemed to know what to say. Because what do you say when someone who felt permanent suddenly becomes a memory? A director who had worked with him years ago sat quietly in a corner, his hands clasped tightly. He was always early, he murmured. Even on days when no one else cared, he cared. Another voice joined in, barely above a whisper. He used to stay back after shoots, just to thank everyone. Even the crew members people forget about. Silence followed. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that presses against your chest until breathing feels difficult. A phone buzzed somewhere. No one moved to answer it. Outside, the crowd continued to grow. News had spread faster than anyone expected. People who had never met him in person came running, driven by something deeper than logic. Because Yu Menglong wasn't just an actor. He was a presence. A constant. A voice in the background of their lives. And now that voice was gone. Or at least, it felt that way. Suddenly, a large screen flickered to life near the entrance. A previously unreleased video began to play. The crowd stilled instantly. It was him. Alive. Smiling. The footage was simple. No heavy editing, no dramatic music. Just Yu Menglong sitting in what looked like a quiet room, natural light spilling across his face. He looked tired. But peaceful. "I don't know when you'll see this," he began, his voice calm, almost gentle. "But if you are, then I guess things didn't go the way I hoped." A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. Some covered their mouths. Others leaned closer, as if afraid to miss even a second. "I've always believed that life isn't about how long you stay, but how deeply you connect while you're here." He paused, looking down for a moment before meeting the camera again. "If you're watching this, I want you to promise me something." The silence was absolute now. Even the rain seemed to soften. "Don't stop living just because I did." Tears fell freely across the audience. "Don't hold on to me so tightly that you forget to hold on to your own dreams." His smile returned, faint but genuine. "I was never meant to be forever. None of us are." A deep breath. "But the moments we shared, those can be." Someone in the crowd began to sob uncontrollably. "I've seen your messages," he continued. "Your stories, your struggles, your victories. And I wish I could reply to all of them." He laughed softly. "I really tried, you know." The room, the crowd, the world watching, everything felt like it was holding its breath. "If I ever made you feel less alone, then I think I did something right." He leaned slightly closer to the camera. "And if you ever feel like giving up, just remember, you made it this far." A pause. One final look. "Keep going. For me." The screen went black. No music. No credits. Just silence. And then, the entire crowd broke. People cried openly, unashamed. Strangers held each other. Some sank to the ground, overwhelmed by a grief that now felt both heavier and strangely lighter at the same time. Because somehow, he had spoken to them one last time. The funeral itself was private. But the farewell, the real farewell, belonged to the people. As evening approached, candles began to appear. 1. Then 10. Then hundreds. Until the entire area glowed with a soft, flickering light that pushed back against the darkness. A quiet tribute. No grand speeches. No forced performances. Just presence. A group of fans began to sing softly, one of the songs from his most beloved drama. Their voices were shaky at first. But slowly, others joined in. The melody spread through the crowd, rising into the night like a promise. Not of forgetting, but of remembering. Always. Somewhere in the distance, a single spotlight illuminated the memorial portrait once more. For a brief moment, as the wind shifted and the candlelight danced, it almost looked like he was smiling again. Not the polished smile from the screen, but something softer. Something real. As if he could see them. As if he knew. And maybe, in a way, he did. The night grew deeper. But no one rushed to leave. Because leaving would mean accepting it. Accepting that this was truly the end. And for many, they weren't ready. Not yet. Not tonight. So they stayed. Holding on to the light. Holding on to each other. Holding on to the memory of a man who had somehow become more than just a name. More than just a face. He had become a part of them. And parts like that don't simply disappear. They linger. In quiet moments. In familiar scenes. In the way a certain line hits differently now. In the way silence feels heavier, but also meaningful. Because sometimes, the last walk of a legend isn't about the distance they travel. It's about the impact they leave behind. And as the final candle flickered against the night, one thing became undeniably clear. Yu Menglong may have taken his last walk, but he would never truly be gone. Because this was what strength actually looked like. Feeling everything. And still standing. "I'm not leaving you empty," he said softly. "I'm leaving you everything you need." Another pause. "And then, if you ever feel lost, don't look for me." A ripple of confusion. A hint of fear. But then he continued. "Look within yourself." A gentle smile. "That's where I'll be." The screen held on his face for a few seconds longer. And then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Soft. Warm. Familiar. "If I could ask for one last thing," he said, "don't make my ending the saddest part of your story." A tear slipped down his cheek. But he didn't wipe it away. "Make it the reason you start living differently." A deep breath. And then, "Goodbye." The screen went black. This time, it didn't just feel like silence. It felt like something closing. Something final. But also, something opening. Because as the crowd stood there, broken, emotional, overwhelmed, something inside them had changed. The grief was still there. It always would be. But now, it wasn't just heavy. It was meaningful. People didn't collapse this time. They didn't scream. They didn't beg. They stood. Quietly. Together. Holding on to something deeper than pain. Understanding. A girl who had been crying all night wiped her face slowly. "He didn't leave us," she whispered. Her friend nodded. "He just changed where he is." Nearby, the older man placed his hand over his heart. And for the first time, he smiled. Not a wide smile. Not a happy one. But a peaceful one. The kind that comes after a storm finally passes. As people began to walk away, not in despair, but in quiet reflection, the city slowly returned to life. Cars moved. Voices returned. The world continued. Just like he said it should. But something was different now. Because everyone who had been there, everyone who had watched, everyone who had felt even a fraction of what this moment meant, they carried him with them. Not as a memory frozen in the past, but as something alive. Something present. Something guiding. And as the camera of your story slowly fades to black, as the final scene lingers just a little longer, let the silence sit. Let the emotion breathe. Because stories like this don't end when the screen goes dark. They stay. They echo. They become a part of us. And maybe, just maybe, that's what it truly means to never be forgotten. If you love celebrity thrillers like this, subscribe now because tomorrow's story is even darker.